So we're very excited, and it's all free for law firms. So come on in if you haven't already. So for our panel guest today, I'm Doug Geller. I'll be the moderator and just asking questions, very loose, very open discussion, nothing really too scripted, but just enough to spark really good conversation. We've got Sue from Iron Mountain, Managing Director of Thought Leadership and Customer Success. Sue brings a great deal of research and information in this area, and so she's great to speak with. And we've got Chris from ESPLEGAL, founder of ESPLEGAL, and Chris runs and owns a staffing company that is specialized in legal, and so he's got some great insight. And the ever famous Jason Thomas from Cole Scott, CIO, and Jason is just knows so much about everything and anything legal with staffing and his staff, but also within the firm. And he just brings such a great perspective, especially with working with so many different software companies and law firms and whatnot. So you've got some good information there. I will stop it so we can come back to our videos and we'll ask some questions. I don't think it makes a difference, the size of your firm. I'm sure all different size firms and all different departments have HR or staffing issues. But Chris, tell us a little bit about what you do, what you've been seeing and what you go through, and a little insight into your business as well.
Thanks, Doug. We started ESP about 25 years ago. And at the time, my background had been dedicated in the legal market, selling, I'll age myself, word processors to law firms back in the early mid-'80s. Then worked for Equitrack, selling cost recovery, briefly sold time and billing, and then decided to create a recruiting firm focused on technology staffing exclusively in the legal market. So that's all I've done for 25 years. So I hope I can add some value just based on my experience alone. I don't know if you want me to tell you a little bit about what I see as a trend and what's happened over the last couple of years.
Start the conversation. That's great.
Yeah. So in the recruiting world, we have something called a pool of passive candidates. And then you've always got, and everybody's aware of, active candidates. So those active candidates are definitely going to make a move, want to make a move, or actively searching, posting their resume. Then you get this larger group of people called passive candidates, and we call that a pool of passive candidates. And that's if it's this position with this salary, with this skill set needed in this area, then call me. Well, when COVID hit, I think everybody just decided to grab on and cling to the ship they were in, and nobody made a move. So staffing literally dried up at that mid-2020 and late through the end of 2020. We saw things starting to lift and change in 2021. But the initial pool of candidates had shrunk greatly. So when people did have a need, you're coming to us and I'm going, we can't get anyone to make a move. There's no passive candidates looking. And there's kind of been a change over 2021 leading into 2022. Demand has been so strong for staffing and the need that people are jumping, making moves, making changes. So the market has become extremely hot. So I think while in early 2021, the difficulty might have been a lack of candidates, today's market, it's candidates are being more selective and looking for specific things in order to make a change.
And isn't it true then that the candidates are asking for higher salaries because they know it's harder to fulfill the position that they're going through? Jason, what have you seen in that area as far as members maybe in IT or with the firm who say, hey, I'm going to stay, but I know you're looking for other people, and I'm a hot commodity. I'm hard to find. Are you facing situations like that? Oh, Jason, you're on mute.
Yes, so I can speak to the at least the hiring of associates, that piece for sure. We've been pretty stable on the IT side, and a lot of it's outsourced. their law firms are kind of offering, I wouldn't say outrageous salaries, but pretty competitive numbers for less hours and allegedly less work. So this idea of sticking it out with the firm for a few years and then eventually making a partner doesn't seem to be the goal, at least anymore. They just want to work their hours during the day and then just go home.
Right.
And so that's so if they're getting more money to do that, they're going to do it. Now, long term, I don't know how realistic it is to be offering really high numbers for lower hours. I mean, eventually, I think that will catch up. But right now, there's enough work in the industry or the market to sustain it for now.
Right.
And then, I don't think not anybody, but a lot of them just, they just want to be. They don't want to make a partner. They don't want, they don't have those kind of goals. They just want to be, I call it the forever associate, which is fine, but there's more of that now than there used to be.
It's so interesting because, and Sue, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, because there's this whole concept of, well, then how do you really check to see how well somebody's working? If they're working from home or they really don't care anymore about achieving that upper status anymore, it's like, how do you rate them? How do you know how well they're doing? And how do we check to see their work? Has there been studies on this? Is there anything you can add to that?
Yeah, I can. I come from an information management, information governance background. And for the last 13 years, I've worked pretty closely with the Law Firm Information Governance Symposium, better known as LFIGS, and we've got a couple of our members actually attending today. But they published a paper in 2020, towards the end of 2020. I guess we published it 2021, but it was all about recruiting in the time of COVID and retention in the time of COVID. And some of the things that they came up with to really, consider what employees were thinking about work now as a result of the pandemic. Some of them were doing surveys or interviews to say, which would you prefer? Do you want to work at home? Do you want to work in the office? Do you want to work part-time and, half in and half out? And really, having been a very sort of strict environment, allowing for more of that to happen, again, simply because talent will move, and it's all about retention and attracting talent. And it's interesting, one of our members last week said that she had heard someone came back to her very, very large law firm, a COO, who was talking to other COOs, and they were saying that they're being poached like crazy because that particular talent set, and Galina is on, she knows very well what we're talking about. They're all about information and managing data, and they've become suddenly very popular, and these other verticals are swooping in and picking them up. So, but some of the other things that they talked about in terms of, how do you really know what's going on during the day? They say you should focus on accomplishments, not activity. Really set goals.
Right.
Communication is key. And we'll talk a little bit later about some recent research on wellness. But, communication, one-on-ones, just, really staying on top of the person as not only an employee, but as a human being is really a big part of what needs to happen today.
Right. I know when this all started at GDSI, we were getting calls daily from firms around the world just saying, hey, we need tools built into our document management, our case system, our time tracking system to really analyze what people are doing from home. They had no way of controlling what was being worked on, and our business took off just from that alone. I remember that was a pretty crazy time. But along those lines, Chris, what do you see as far as, are there specific departments that have a higher turnover than others? Is there certain areas that are just constantly moving and they just can't keep enough people?
I'm going to comment on Sue's topic, then I'll come back to your question. And I'm sure most of you know the Pinhawk Law Technology newsletter. I think a lot of people in the legal market get that newsletter sent out daily or weekly. They had an article by Microsoft posted yesterday, and it's a new study they did that says the summary was, we aren't going back to work. And it's talking about the remote work versus coming in. But the question you'd ask of Sue is, how do you manage staff? And just a comment, I don't have the answer, but their study showed an increase of 252% in meeting time spent through studying Microsoft Teams and the meetings going on.
Right.
Now, it didn't really compare if it was, that's just the Teams increase or just overall increase of meeting time. I think they were implying it was overall increase of meeting time in order to, I think, manage that remote staff. So I'm not sure if that's realistic, and a lot of the firms were doing that, but that's something Microsoft pointed out.
Huh.
As far as areas, I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that and how you.
Well, I would just wonder, Chris, in comparison, did they go back and figure out the time spent around those sorts of meetings in office? When we weren't on Teams, but rather sitting in a room all together, how did that stack up? I'm just curious if there was anything about that.
No, there wasn't.
Okay, because it sounds so.
But it still sounded like, boy, if that's how you're managing your people, they're not going to get their work done. So,
Right.
As far as our niche is legal, specific technology only within legal. So I can't speak to paralegals or partners and associates and administrative staff, but we've seen, unlike Jason, you're lucky, Jason, that you've had a success with retaining your staff, because we're seeing a lot of firms are losing staff and needing to replace them, but we're also seeing growth. We're seeing net new positions being added, a lot of them in the technology sector specifically. So we see that as a positive.
I have a follow on, Chris. Can I ask you, are you then seeing, because this has come up a lot amongst our law firm members, are you seeing changes in job descriptions, like new roles that are more heavily skewed to, Jason in IT and data as opposed to records? Or because that's something that is going to have to evolve at some point in time.
Yes, absolutely, Sue. And Jason, you may even want to comment on what you're seeing within your firm, but we're seeing a demand for governance. I used to look at records as a non-IT related search, and we wouldn't touch a records manager search. Now we're getting bombarded with, governance positions and that need to manage data and keep that data secure because it's all electronic at this point. We're seeing, we went for quite some time without seeing too much activity in the e-discovery sector within law firms. We saw a lot in the vendor side, but now we're seeing a demand for e-discovery technology support staff or litigation support staff. That's another very hot area. Security is still booming. Firms who've never had a dedicated director of security are bringing on CISOs or bringing on IT directors and building staff in that area as well. That's what we're seeing from our demand from a search standpoint.
Yeah, I got to imagine, Jason, you're seeing the exact same thing. It's probably this huge need for all different areas of IT that maybe we never thought of before.
Yeah, information security and governance. Our security budget's blown up and ballooned, I would say, in the last few years. So we're definitely looking at InfoSec hires for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. Like prior to COVID, the hot topic was, all the phishing attempts and email, and teaching users to be careful about opening up emails. And now it's like, oh my God, it's like the least of our issues. But I would imagine now it's back to security, and we really have to grow that. But again, I have to imagine that with all these positions being filled in and all these new staffing, changes, it's just higher cost too, right? I mean, it's more money going to staff and to IT. But what about, for the three of you, what about, geographically? I mean, are there certain areas of the state or the country where we see it more than others? Is it harder to find staff in certain areas than others? I would imagine the big cities, obviously, it's a lot easier to find staff, but what is that like?
From our perspective, it's across the nation. The demand is pretty equal throughout. We're doing searches in New York and DC, struggling to find just basic help desk people, just because I think the ones who were going to move have moved and the others are staying put.
Right.
Then a lot of help desk people who are interested in leaving and making a change are doing so because they don't want to return to the office. But then it's a challenge in finding that firm that's going to, I guess, allow that 100% remote. We're seeing much more of a hybrid policy coming out from most firms, with 2 to 3 days a week being in the office and then, home. So yet staff are still looking for more remote.
Right. And I have to assume too, I mean, as a software development firm for legal, we are certainly not invited to go back to law firms. I mean, even those that are in office, nobody wants to see us. No one cares physically anymore. We used to do 6 a.m. flights on a Monday morning, and you come back home Wednesday night, and fly around the globe doing that. But it's no longer like that anymore. Sue, is there any research on that as far as anything that you've come across as far as consultants or people coming right back into the office or coming back to work with different clients?
It's a whole different situation.
Right.
Case, we had a member who's been with a firm for many, many years in Chicago. Now she's retiring. And rather than, demanding that someone sit in Chicago for that role going forward, any office where they are is wide open to bring someone in to support a very large role in information governance. So, it's wherever you can find the staff. But I just can't envision, going back entirely to the office anymore. And we've got to think about demographics too, and just the age of the people that are coming in to replace folks during the Great Resignation, or people who just never retired over the last couple of years, and all of that knowledge walked out the door. But the next generation, and this is another disruptor, I mean, let alone the pandemic, is they've come into this born digitally. They work with collaboration tools all the time. I mean, what the heck? Before too long, they're going to be living a second life in the metaverse.
Metaverse, right?
You know what I mean? So there's not going to be, and I know Jason's smiling at that, but I just think we have to also be aware of the shift in the demographics and the expectations of how these other generations that are moving into the marketplace are expecting to work and communicate, avatars, over whatever. But I mean, legal is different in that, you've got the client that may be expecting to see someone in person, but their needs may change too, as their older folks time out. I mean, that's not a nice way of saying it, but what I mean? It happens. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Jason, do you know if anyone in the firm are using staffing companies, or do you use Indeed or any one of those type of staffing systems?
We recruit internally, but most of it's as far as associates go, we have really good relationships with in Florida with the major universities. So we do a lot of marketing to UF and FSU and all those colleges, and that's how I would say a lot of our associates, or I would say a good chunk of our associates coming in. Otherwise, we're an in-house recruiter. I don't think we're touching Indeed too much. Maybe be a little bit of LinkedIn and couple social platforms. That's about it.
Right, 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 right. And I have to assume that the law school graduates coming in, they just have such a different perspective because they don't know any better, right? It's like,
No, what you learn in law school is not what you're going to be doing here. That's for sure.
yeah, it's true, right?
I just have to add that even the information governance people are looking into universities to recruit from as well. Bring them in fresh and then
Right.
teach them the ways and see that there's room for professional development, which I think is a really smart idea. Go get them while they're malleable and whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's there's somewhat of a disconnect going on in the market today with hiring, and there's a couple different studies that I read just recently. One was that from a group called the Future Forum, and they said 45% of executives who are currently working remotely want to return to the office, but only 17% of the staff who are currently working want to return to the office. And then when you look at what's going to attract people to leave and come to work, salary's important, benefits, but 77% surveyed said remote work is a must-have for them to make a change. So there's some dynamics going on where I think, Sue, you were touching on it earlier, where I'm thinking there's a disconnect between leadership and management and what the staff are really looking for in today's market too.
I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time, Doug, but I just wanted to follow on with Chris, because we just had The Economist do a very large survey, 611 executives around the globe, 4 different regions, and their top priority is employee well-being and safety. And at pre-pandemic, it was down below. Since the pandemic, it's jumped up over data security, over digital transformation, and then number 4 was the hybrid workforce. So,
right.
I really do think it's fascinating that there's this awareness at very high levels in organizations of all different stripes.
Yeah.
That employee wellness isn't just something to throw money at necessarily, but to really integrate into everything that you're doing. And that means giving people choices, giving them options. And I don't think that's going to go away. I mean, it's going to have an interesting impact on culture. In fact, there's some companies, particularly Silicon Valley, they now have chief well-being officers.
Right. I've seen that. Right. That's interesting. Now, it's a good point. It's almost like you have to entice people in a different way to make them come working. We've noticed more and more that staff have left to start their own companies or their own law firms or their own consulting groups. And I hear of this more and more, where we've got attorneys calling us saying, hey, I just left such and such firm. I started a new consulting practice and we need software, right? We need assistance. So it's more of that now than I've ever experienced before. And I have to imagine that all of you have seen the same thing. And also, firms breaking apart, groups leaving to start new firms, and they need new software as well. And they need to go on their way, which kind of changes the whole dynamic than ever before. Jason, have you noticed users or groups of users just coming off and starting going smaller with smaller firms and saying, hey, things have changed too much and we can specialize and focus in a certain area?
Yeah, I think the smaller firms are actually the ones that are offering more money to
Oh, really?
to get interest from associates. Yep.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so fun. Cool. Very cool. Well, it's good. It's good. Well, those are the basic questions that I had. It was the basic discussion that I wanted to get through. If there's any questions, please put them into the chat, or any thoughts for any of our panel members here. We'll give you a minute to put it in and go through everything. But I think we've asked all of our questions and kind of hit all the hot topics. Ray, anything that you wanted to go through?
No, I think I'm seeing the same thing at World Software as really helpful, actually. And I have employees asking, just not even asking, telling me that, hey, we've been working fine for 2 years from home. Why would you make us come in and drive to the office? I see the higher salaries within reason are those top tier employees that have offers. The rest of them, 80%, they're not asking for any more salary. Really, we pay good. They just want the flexibility in their life. So that's that was just my comment on that. I was able to record this, Doug, through my end,
Oh,
so
good.
we can post through our channels and social media
Great.
and such. Really good information here.
We didn't touch on that salary topic, and that is an important one. We just published our 2022 salary guide. You can go to ESPLEGAL.com and take a look. We break it out by AM 100 and AM 200 firms, and then we do a separate section on smaller firms because you obviously have a different need for technology staff. But another survey came out and said salary was the number one requirement by staff looking to make a change, followed by remote, and then it got into benefits like vacation and wellness and things like that. But we were shocked when we looked at the results of our salary survey. We've never seen an increase so significant from one year to the next. So
Wow.
Firms have.
That's great. Galena just asked a great question, and this plays into it, I think, with the whole concept of salaries is, staff retention. How are we keeping staff? What's the best way to hold on to staff? I'd love to hear from each one of your perspectives, because whether it's IT or it's general legal staff, it's expensive to replace each one of them. So how do we do it? What's the trick? Jason or Sue or
I'll go for, certainly salary adjustments. It happens all the time in corporate America, right? Where you have talent walk out the door because you're paying them what market value is. They get hired at that, what the salary they wanted somewhere else. And then when you go to replace them, you've got to pay that amount anyway.
Right.
But it's just like that weird lack of logic that happens all the time. But the other inducements or enticements are that flexible work schedule, the ability to go home and pick up the kids and come back and finish work. I just think it's this integration, not balance, but integrating work and life that going forward is going to, in some instances, even trump being paid more. So that would be my.
So to this point about being paid more, even now when we talk to folks, it's not even really, it's about the money, but that's, it's just more just kind of lifestyle. And, you can hire all the wellness coaches and whatever kind of people, but if you don't change anything in your environment, all you're doing is saying, hey, I know you're really stressed out with all the work we have. Why don't you go see the wellness person? It's not, that doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
We just call it kind of greenwashing, right? Like just paint this really great picture. Oh yeah, we're really good at sustainability and we're really good at, all the health and well-being, but it's a cultural thing, and a lot of that has to come from the very highest levels in an organization too. That making it a good place to work. So many factors.
What are you going to say, Chris?
We just made a placement of a IT manager, and that person literally came to us and said, I'm not as concerned with salary. I'm more focused on benefits and a flexible work schedule. Those were her number two. Number 1 and 2 was 4 weeks vacation was kind of what she thought should be the minimum, and then having flexibility in her day to work her hours and work remotely, but willing to come in, but not necessarily staying till 5 o'clock on the dot. Having flexibility to leave, go pick up her kids, then go back to work after she's done dinner, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm assuming those two are the most common benefits. Are there other benefits that people are asking for that are more prevalent than others? besides vacation and working from home?
We find healthcare costs. Sometimes firms are very generous when it comes to covering an employee's expense for the premium for the healthcare coverage. Then you look at the cost for the family, and it becomes exorbitant. I mean, we've seen individuals that we've worked with this past year where their out of pocket to cover their family is anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500, and that's just to cover a spouse and one or two kids. So firms that are able to perhaps put together a better benefits package with health care and reducing those out-of-pocket expenses for employees, that too could mean a lot more even so than perhaps the increased salary and some of the other benefits. So I don't know if you witnessed any of that.
Yeah, Chris, I'm just wondering if some element of professional development, like being able to help subsidize getting another degree, getting through law school is part of that enticement as well.
I would say it's a little lower from the people we are working with. They and Jason, you'll probably agree with this. I think your better technology staff want to continue with learning and want to go to seminars and have the firm cover some added expense. But they're not looking always for that higher level education that an attorney might or other staff. But technology training seems to be important to IT staff from what we've seen.
That's great. Yeah, we have found at GDSI with our staff, it's of course toys, right? Whatever laptops or computer systems or whatever we can find. Of course, if you can actually find them, if you can actually get it delivered to your house, that's a whole different issue in itself, which is for a different webinar. But toys, but education and covering medical costs. I mean, that's insurance. That's like huge. More important than anything else. And of course, working from home now. Nobody wants to go in anymore. So that part of it's changed. Well, cool. Very good. All right. Well, I think we've kind of gone through it all. Unless there's anything else that anybody wants to ask or bring up, this has been a ton of fun and very educational. I appreciate everyone's time and the panel. Thank you for preparing and working with us. And if there's anything else anybody wants to ask, please do so. And I guess I see
Glena's typing.
I see Glena, you're typing. Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Glena. Hopefully this was all beneficial to everybody, and we appreciate it. But thank you for your time, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Please
and Doug, just one last thing. Do we want to perhaps share out that report that LFIGS wrote on staffing, perhaps to the folks who attended or registered? That might be a good resource.
Absolutely. That'll be huge. We'll also post it to the Aptivos site.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Well. Yeah. All right. We'll share everything. Thank you so much, everyone.